Welcome in. It is the return of the MMQB podcast with Albert Breer, video edition. Got my producer, Will Pyle, here. The new season's underway. Didn't get off to the best start. I know I'm a little bit late. I promised the people on Periscope I would have been on about 45 minutes ago. My train got into the city late. Then I got kind of held up at Penn Station, so I apologize for that. But we're off and running now. Training camps are underway. I've already been to two of them. I was at the Bears on Friday and Saturday, the Ravens on Sunday. And I'll kick off a tour starting Thursday. I'll wind up seeing about 20 teams. I know all of you guys are excited to talk football. I'm excited to talk football. And we're going to be talking a lot of football here the whole year. Just a couple housekeeping things to get out of the way. First, we will probably start doing this on a weekly basis at some point in August. I'm not sure exactly when. It'll be after I'm done with my training camp trip. And I will keep you guys updated on that. Until then, we got this for you. We're also going to have the weekly podcast, the traditional podcast that I do with Andy Gresh and Lou Pellegrino that pops every Friday morning. Download, subscribe, do everything that you got to do to listen to that. And you will get this too in your feed if you subscribe to the traditional podcast. And so for those of you that weren't here last year, the way we do this, we get to 5 news items every week. That's what we're going to do here. And then I'll get to all of your questions on Periscope, everybody on Periscope. You hang on for about 15 minutes, 10, 15 minutes, and we'll get to all of your questions. Okay, news item number 1. Julio Jones will not report to Falcons training camp without a revised deal. He's got 3 years left on his current deal. The Falcons told him that if he showed up, that they'd redo his contract after the season. He's saying that's not good enough. He's one of 6 veteran players that I think we're all going to be watching this week, or 5 now with David Johnson reporting. The other 4 that there still hasn't been word on. I'd be stunned if Aaron Donald showed up to Rams camp. I don't think he'll be there, but he's one of the 5, along with Jones, Khalil Mack, Taylor Lewan, and Earl Thomas. And I sort of can separate these guys into categories. Now, David Johnson would be in the category with Taylor Lewan, with Khalil Mack, with Aaron Donald. Those guys are coming off of rookie deals. Those guys are looking for life-changing money. Jones and Thomas are in a little bit of a different category, and those two are similar in one way and different in another. I can't blame either of those guys for giving this a shot. Both of them are approaching 30 years old. Both of them have played at the highest level at their positions, and each of those guys knows that their football mortality is right in front of them. So, I think with any football player, you get closer to 30, unless you're a quarterback, and you probably look at it and you say, I don't know how many more bites of the apple I'm going to get. I'm going to give this a shot. I don't blame those guys at all for giving it a shot. The idea that maybe I could get one last big payday and put some pressure on the team to give me one. That piece of it makes sense. Okay, the difference between Thomas and Jones is that Thomas is in the final year of a contract. Julio Jones has 3 years left. And I think for the Falcons, as much as they value Julio Jones, the precedent that would set would be a problem for them. They've got a lot of young guys they're trying to take care of. And so I think the question sort of becomes here, who blinks first? Julio Jones has over $60 million in career earnings. He's been responsible with his money. He's got the financial wherewithal to incur the fines and to continue sitting. And if he is resolved to wait this thing out, he's got the ability to do that. On the flip side, the Falcons just drafted Calvin Ridley. It actually could help them early in camp to give Ridley the reps that Jones might have gotten. They might look at it and say, well, Julio will be healthier when he comes back because he's not going to have the wear and tear of having gone through camp. But once they get closer to the season, they're very clearly in a championship window. They've got a lot of young guys in that defense that are going to be up for contract soon. And you guys all know the young core. They've got Vic Beasley, Devondre Campbell, Deion Jones, Keon O'Neal. There are a lot of young guys in that defense, and those guys aren't going to be on rookie contracts forever. And so they're very clearly in a window to compete for a championship now. And so the question becomes who blinks first. And I don't know that there's an easy answer to this one. There's also a subplot here. And I think this applies to all of these guys. It applies to Julio. It applies to Earl. It applies to Khalil Mack. It applies to Aaron Donald. It applies to David Johnson. And it applies to Taylor Lewan. The gap between what quarterbacks and non-quarterbacks make has never been greater. When Matt Ryan signed his deal, the quarterback position broke the $30 million per year barrier. That happened before any player at any other position got to $20 million per. When Ndamukong Suh signed his deal 3 years ago, he was making roughly 86% of what the top quarterback was making. now the top paid position player, Von Miller, is making somewhere around 63, 64% of what the top quarterback's making. And so that gap has continued to grow and grow. And look, there's no question quarterback's the most important position. But I think some of these guys at other positions are looking at it and saying to themselves, why aren't our numbers growing at the same rate? They're not like, you may not be asking to be paid like Matt Ryan, but why aren't our numbers? Why isn't there inflation on our side too? Especially when the cap's growing by about $10 million a year. So that's part of it too for all of those guys. News item number 2: Browns receiver Josh Gordon won't report to camp this week. He said he'll instead be engaging in, quote, my overall health and treatment plan. He said in a statement that he posted on Twitter that he's excited to start the season with the team. I think we should be careful about talking in any sort of absolutes on this one. There's been enough noise out there where my feeling on it is, look, the breadcrumbs would tell you that something went wrong here. The entire league just had 6 weeks off. He had plenty of time to get right. And I think the top concern with a player like this has to be his own well-being, beyond whether you're worried about whether or not he's going to get on the field and play. So I think based on the steps that he took, based on where he was, based on what we were hearing in May and June, how he looks physically, I don't think that this is something that was expected. And I can tell you that a lot of people in that Browns building were stunned when Josh Gordon posted that on Twitter on Monday morning. And that tells you that word hadn't gotten around the building. I don't know if anyone knew, but I know there are a lot of people that didn't know. And so I think this blindsided some people in that building. There was some element of surprise. And so either Josh wasn't communicating with them or something went wrong, but there's something that's not right here. And I think the other piece of it, the Browns had to be prepared for this. No matter what, you couldn't trust that he's necessarily going to be out there for you. So I think you always had to look at this guy as a bonus. And for Hugh Jackson's sake, for Todd Haley's sake, for the sake of a lot of people in that organization, I hope that that's the way that they were building the team. That anything we get from Josh Gordon's a bonus, because based on his history, and this isn't a shot at him, based on his history, I don't know how you could possibly say we can count on that guy. All right, number 3, Jimmy Garoppolo was featured in a couple of stories earlier this week. A really good one you guys can check out on our website was by Jenny Fuentes, my colleague at the MMQB.com. Plenty of interesting stuff in there. One that Jenny had was Bill Belichick would text Jimmy after every one of his regular season starts last year. That's interesting, right? Like that the coach of the Patriots was texting the quarterback of the 49ers after every one of those starts, right? And then there was another story in Bleacher Report where Jimmy said that his belief was that he was already a better player than Tom Brady last year. A couple things to sort through here that I think are important. Okay, the first one is that I don't think it's a big deal that Jimmy said what he said. And I'll take this back to a story I did on Tom Brady 6 years ago. And I was talking to one of his closest friends, a guy he played with at Michigan, a tight end who played for the Cleveland Browns for a couple of years named Aaron Shea. And they were at a wedding together or something like that in the summer of 2001 before the Patriots reported to camp. And Brady had been the 4th-string quarterback the year before. And Brady told Shea, I'm going to beat Drew Bledsoe out. And Shea first thought he was kidding, then thought he was crazy. And Brady really believed it. But at the time, you got to remember, the Patriots had just signed Drew Bledsoe to a $100 million contract. He was the only quarterback in that franchise's history that had been able to establish like any sort of longevity with that level of play. And here's Tom Brady telling his old college buddy, no, I'm going to beat him out. That's the way a lot of these guys think. Even guys who aren't that great, like they think that way. I think you need that to play at this level. And so that's just Jimmy being honest. The second piece of it, which I thought was more interesting, was what Jenny had, was the Belichick thing. God, does he you anything, like everything that I've heard, and then some of the stuff you see like this. Bill really liked Jimmy. And I think Bill still misses Jimmy. And I think Jimmy was Bill's ticket to, like, all right, like, I developed another quarterback, right? And one of the things that's sort of hung over the Patriots, like I feel like it's hung over the Patriots, has been that, oh, you got lucky with Brady. Oh, if you swung and you got it right with a 6th round pick. Congratulations. If you thought he was that great, and this is true, if you thought he was that great, you would have taken him a lot earlier. There's no way you would have taken that chance. That's all true. But I think a piece of this is Bill being able to totally dispel that. Because if you develop another one, if you develop another guy who like you can win a championship with, well now and you do that with 2 non-first round picks, you somehow pull off this like Favre to Rodgers, Montana to Young transition. God, that adds another line to his resume. I think part of the motivation here for Bill is I want to send him to a good place where he's going to look good so I can look back at that and say I was right. And I think he takes pride in the way Jimmy plays. And I think it's proof for him. Like, we're pretty good at what we do around here. And maybe we got lucky getting Brady in the 6th round, but we had a little something to do with how good he became too. And so I think that there's just a lot there. Like you read the stuff about, there's just a lot there when it comes to Bill himself, the Patriots organization. I've written a bunch of stuff on it. Seth Wickersham did some great stuff on it. Jenny, I'd encourage you to read Jenny's piece. The Bleacher Report piece was good too. It's just, to me, like in every one of these stories, there's just chunks of them that are like just rich in kind of where the Patriots are at going into 2018. Okay, number 4. Giants receiver Odell Beckham will report to camp on time. That's according to my old colleague at NFL Network, Kim Jones. Look, I think Pat Shurmur deserves a ton of credit here. I think Pat did a fantastic job of relationship building, and it's such an important piece for coaches these days. And that's why you see guys like Doug Peterson and Dan Quinn. Like that piece of being a head coach in the NFL is really important. And I think Pat Shurmur deserves a lot of credit for making it a priority to establish a relationship with the guy from the time he got the job in January. And it just started with texting in January, and it grew, and there was an open line of communication when he was going to be there, when he wasn't during May and June. And I think there's been some level of trust established. And I think because they built that relationship, now you have investment from Odell back into the Giants program, back into what Dave Gettleman and Pat Shurmur have been trying to build. And that was necessary before they were going to pay him. Now, you can say what you want, like, he could have tried a wildcat strike in January or February or March. I just don't think that was going to work with these guys. Like, and I think they would have considered trading him if it had been that way. I think he was always going, but for them to commit to him long term and for them to pay him at the level he wants to be paid, he was always going to have to do this. So credit to Pat Shurmur for relationship building with Beckham, and credit to Beckham for being a pro and being intelligent enough to understand that if he was going to get paid in 2018 by the New York Giants, and there's great value because he's so marketable, there's great value to him to playing in New York, like it was going to have to be this way. Okay, number 5, sad story this week. I wanted to touch on this. Vikings coach Tony Sparano passed away at 56 on Sunday. You guys have heard the story. Chris Mortensen reported it over the weekend. I subsequently heard a similar story that, on Friday he checked in the hospital. Went to the emergency room with chest pains. He was cleared. He was let go, and then was found by his wife unconscious on Sunday morning, right before they were going to go to church. I think you've seen the outpouring of love and admiration from the NFL community. My favorite story about him actually kind of relates back to me, and my experience with him when I was a Cowboys beat writer in 2007. I'm brand new there. You're trying to establish relationships. He actually coached the University of New Haven in the 90s, and so he recruited a couple guys I played high school football with. The first time I had a chance to have more than a cursory talk with him, I brought him up, and he remembered the guys really well. And you think back on that now, and it's just how he remembers people and how he remembers guys who played for him. And he only had these guys for a year because he was off to the NFL a year out. We graduated high school in 98. He was off to the NFL in 99. But that's what you hear about him from everybody, like how much respect he had from all the players, how he cared about the players as people, and how, it's just a really real, genuine guy. And I talked to a couple of his teammates about it, and it's the same thing from everybody. It's like you knew what you were getting with Tony. And one last thing before we get to the questions, we're going to get to all your questions up here on Periscope in just a second. My memory, and I think one of his legacies, of course, is that the Wildcat in 2008, because the Wildcat really opened the door for the read option, which has opened the door for the RPOs, which is sort of, there's been this explosion of thought on the offensive side of the ball in the NFL, and this explosion of creativity. And I think a lot of it's being willing to take stuff from the college game, to take stuff from the high school game, and Tony was on the front end of that in 2008. But I remember the year before covering the Cowboys and how volatile that locker room was, and you had T.O. in there, and you had Patrick Creighton, who was a character. You had guys in the offensive line who were characters. You had Jay Ratliff in that locker room. You had Roy Williams in that locker room. It was an interesting group of players, and that team was a little bit of a powder keg, and Wade did a good job of kind of keeping them engaged. But when things went wrong, Tony was sort of the chief of police on that coaching staff. And that was because he had everybody's respect. And one of the reasons they were able to get to 13-3, even though they dealt with a lot of drama that year, was because they had an authority figure in the building. And I think Wade and a lot of other people would tell you that one of the differences was between 07 and 08, when the wheels came off, was Tony Sparano. They had Tony Sparano in 07 and they didn't have him in 08. All right, that's the 5 news items I wanted to get to today. I'm going to get to all of your questions now. You guys go ahead on Periscope. I'll answer them, and then we will get out of here. Go. I don't know, Will. Maybe the monologue was too long. Here we go. Where's your beef? Belichick and Pats. Why do you think Schiano did not wind up in New England? I think Schiano did not wind up in New England. I think it was a possibility at one point. I think Schiano did not wind up in New England largely because I think he believes, this is just my sense of it, that he's going to have another shot to be a college head coach. And staying as a defensive coordinator on the college level was probably best for him. It was going to affect his stock the least. And he deserves another shot to be a college head coach. Are the Bengals a playoff team? I think that depends on the development of the offensive line. Cordy Glenn, Billy Price. A lot of blame has been placed on Andy Dalton. I don't think Andy Dalton's a great quarterback, but I think he's one of these guys very dependent on what's around him. Their offensive line was very good for the first 5 years of his career. It hasn't been the same the last 2 years. Keep an eye on Cordy Glenn. Keep an eye on the development of Billy Price. Those guys can make a difference. Then you're talking about a different team. We're not getting them as fast today, Will. Is the Cowboys' offense as productive without Bryant, and does Zeke fall off without him there? I think they can be as productive in 2017 because 2017 Des Bryant wasn't very good. I think Zeke will have a very, very good year. I think Zeke's locked in. I think, after going through what he went through in 2017, much of it self-inflicted. After he went through what he went through in 2017, I think he's got a clear head now going into 2018, and I think he's got something to prove. I think he knows that a contract could be on the other side of this, and so I think you're going to see a motivated Zeke Elliott. And I think Zeke Elliott's one of the most important players on any team in the league, because if he's a 1,800-yard rusher, I think he changes the dynamic for Dak Prescott and everybody else on that offense. If you guys are done, then I'll be done. Where will Des Bryant play? I think we have to wait to see somebody get hurt somewhere before we get an answer on that. Diggs going to get a new deal at camp. I'd be surprised if Stephon Diggs gets us a new deal right now, maybe right before the season. They did get Xavier Rhodes done during camp last year, but obviously Anthony Barr and Stephon Diggs are the two big names. Are the Pats really looking to trade Malcolm? I think that Malcolm Mitchell is seen right now as a player in a little bit of physical disrepair, so it'll be interesting to see what they do. And I think there's some disagreement about where he is physically, but I'm almost at the point now where I'd be surprised if he's playing for the Patriots this year. Any news on Luan? Why has it not been a big story? It is a big story. He's a very good player. It hasn't got as much attention, though, because he's an offensive tackle playing for the Titans. I think that's all it is. It's a very good player, potentially top 5 offensive tackle in the league. And I think the deal became complicated by Nate Solder changing the market. Are the Jets a playoff team? I think the Jets can be a playoff team in 2019. I like a lot of what they've done. I think the core on defense with Leonard Williams and Marcus May and Jamal Adams, and now you bring in Tremaine Johnson, is solid, and I think they've got a chance to get a lot better. McCoy investigation, I mentioned this in my column this week. I wonder if they're going to use the commissioner's exempt list. Now we're getting closer. Maybe it looks like it wouldn't happen. it's all I can tell you is it's still ongoing. With the surprise, who would be your surprise team of 2018? It's really, really hard to find a surprise team because I think we talk about the NFL so much in the offseason that it's hard to pick out a team where you say to yourself, God, that team's going to surprise a lot of people. What I do this year is I generally look at teams that are really strong on the lines of scrimmage and teams that could use that like kind of as a springboard. Last year it was the Eagles. I'll give you the Cowboys this year. They're having their offensive line back intact the way it is, having gone through some transition. I think it'll make a difference. I think adding Connor Williams, that makes a difference for them up there. And I think their defensive line's got a chance to be pretty good, especially with DeMarcus Lawrence playing for a contract. All right, let's take 5 more questions, and then we'll get out of here, all right? 5 more? Is Brady playing beyond 2018? Yes. What do you think the Colts record is going to be? If Luck's healthy, 10-6. If Luck's not healthy, 6-10. Where will Le'Veon Bell play next season? That's question number 3. Where will Le'Veon Bell play next season? See, I would say the Lions because they've had that need at running back. I know they like Kerryon Johnson. I'd say the Lions, but with Bob Quinn and Matt Patricia there now, I don't think they'll break the bank for a running back. The Raiders? My producer's a Raiders fan, so let's go with the Raiders. That actually makes some sense. Gruden invests in running backs. Marshawn might be done. Let's go with the Raiders for the last year in Oakland, I think it'll be. We don't even know where they're playing in 2019. Okay, 2 more questions, and then we're out of here. How many wins for the Browns? I'm going to set the over-under on wins for the Browns at 6. I think they're a better team than most people realize, even without Josh Gordon. Last question. Jimmy G to the Pro Bowl. We'll wrap it up there. I know there's been a lot of question why is there so much hype around Jimmy G. Like he only played 5 games. He took a 1-10 team to 6-10. He took a team that looked like it was in disrepair and go down the names of the guys that he was playing with. Pierre Garçon, George Kittle, Garrett Selleck. You look at the guys, Marquise Goodwin. It's not a great team yet, but he was able to elevate people around him. Now, do I think that there could be some bumps in the road? Yeah. But I'll tell you what, the Niners really believe in him. And there was the option there for Kyle Shanahan to turn around and go get Kirk Cousins, and he didn't do it. And I think everybody out there with a pulse knows what Kyle Shanahan thinks of Kirk Cousins. He thinks Kyle Shanahan thinks he could make Kirk Cousins into Drew Brees. And so that he's willing to pass on that guy who he has that background on, and that he's willing to say, we're not worried about quarterback in the draft. And that he's willing to turn around and sign off on a $137.5 million deal tells you everything you need to know. Jimmy came in there with something to prove. I'll tell you this right now. When they traded for Jimmy on Halloween, day before Halloween, whatever it was, they were leaving their options open. It was still possible they'd go get Kirk Cousins. It was still possible they were going to draft one. And Jimmy won that contract. He did not, that was no sure thing. And the fact that Jimmy was able to win that contract in 5 starts tells you all you need to know. Okay, I appreciate you guys coming out. I'm excited for the new season. You guys can follow me on Twitter at Albert Breer, on Instagram at Albert_Breer, on Facebook at Albert R. Breer as the season ramps up here. I can't wait to get out to camps. I can't wait to give you guys all the information that you guys are really, really thirsty for. You guys want to know what's going on with the skill position players for your fantasy team. You want to know what's happening inside each of your teams. I'm going to try and give you guys that over the next few weeks as I go through these camps and all year long. Be sure to check out my MMQB column. I think I'm on 6 now. I got big shoes to fill. I'm trying my best to do it. We did 5 weeks. I took 2 weeks of vacation. We're back this week. We're looking at the Chicago Bears and how what Nagy's doing there is kind of an illustration of what's happening in professional football overall. So I appreciate you guys coming out. Always remember to listen to the MMQB 10 Things podcast and this podcast, the MMQB podcast with Albert Breer. You can catch us on Friday mornings, the traditional podcast, and once the season rolls around, and probably a little sooner than that, we'll be going every Tuesday here from New York City, both on Periscope, on YouTube, and this will drop in Apple Podcasts too. Shout out to everybody listening there. Appreciate you guys coming out. You can get us on Google Play, Stitcher, TuneIn, Apple Podcasts, wherever you get your shows. We'll see you guys not this time next week, but a little bit down the road. Thanks, guys.